Now we will go into how the writ has started. The origin of writ we will look into. The writ originated from the English judicial system along with the English common law. The writ originated from the King's Bench in England. It was a royal court order issued under royal seal. And there is a difference between common law and writ jurisdiction. And the writ was issued, or order was passed in the writ based on the petition filed before the King's Council for exercise of its extraordinary jurisdictional power in a particular matter. As I said, the writ jurisdiction of the court is different from jurisdiction of the common law. And because in the common law, the procedure are more or less a static. It can give relief only where there is a right. Otherwise, the substantial right is available to the person, the private parties. Only in those cases, the common law court can give a relief. And there was cases where the common law did not have any jurisdiction to come to the rescue of the citizen. And moreover, this common law is operated with this certain procedure. There cannot be any deviation with regard to the common law when it comes to giving a relief or redress the suffering or redress the wanting of the citizen. So the common law court was powerless in granting certain relief. Therefore, it necessitated for the King's Bench or judicial system, the England judicial system, to introduce writ petition or invoke writ jurisdiction by the King's Court. In the writ petition, before the King's Court, petitions were filed, the people were heard, the citizens were heard, and then orders was passed. Initially, even in the King's Court, initially writs were only for the Crown and for the Crown Council only. But later on, it was given to, or it was permitted for the common public was also permitted to participate, file a writ petition. The form of adjudication of writ was called prerogative writs. Then we will see the origin of writ in India. The writ in India originated in the 18th century, that is, goes back to 1973 Regulating Act. By 1973 Regulating Act, under which the Supreme Court was established at Calcutta in the year 1974. And in the year 1801, by a separate charter or similar charter, the High Court, as a Supreme Court of Madras, was established. And in the year 1823, Supreme Court of Bombay was established. And for all these three Supreme Courts, letters patent was given to all the courts. Then in the year 1862, three presidencies of Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay, the High Courts were established under High Court Act of 1861, which inherited the power of writ from the above Supreme Court. The power of issuing of writ was exclusive domain of the above said three High Courts, that is chartered High Court, like namely Madras High Court, Calcutta High Court, and Bombay High Court. And though many other High Courts were established subsequent to this act of the High Court Act, 1861, those high courts were not given the power of writ jurisdiction. And the writ jurisdiction of, then what is the power? Oh, though there was a power, what is the provision for issuing the writ petition was section 45 of erstwhile Specific Relief Act of 1877. I will read for a moment. This is under which under this provision, along with the original civil jurisdiction, the high courts were issuing the writs. The section 45 of Specific Relief Acts, somewhat similar to other articles in the Constitution, which said but it is restricted only to the three, along with the civil jurisdiction or original jurisdiction. Those courts, only 3 high courts can issue. That is, any of the high court of judicature at Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay may make an order requiring any specific act to be done or forbore within the local limits of its ordinary original jurisdiction by any person holding a public office, whether of a permanent or a temporary nature, or by any corporation or inferior courts of judicature. Reading this bare reading would show that it encompasses all the public offices where the power, the high courts, the chartered high courts are empowered to issue writs against the officials under section 45 of the Act of the Specific Relief Act of 1877. Then this is what the origin of writs in India. Then writs under Constitution of India. Though it has been inherited, the provision of writ has been inherited from the earlier acts. Though context was taken up, context for introducing the chapter 3, that is fundamental rights, were taken up, or issuing of writ is taken up, but the context is different. Taking into consideration of the changed circumstances, freedom after attaining freedom in India, we were left nowhere. We have to build brick by brick. The society has to build brick by brick. Therefore, and unless and until, as I was telling, that right is given, fundamental right is given, freedom cannot be enjoyed. That should be different from the colonial region after the attaining independence. Therefore, in order to protect the rights of the citizen, each and every citizen, the context of writ petition was further fine-tuned, and in line with the protecting these fundamental rights, the provisions were created. And under chapter 3, the fundamental rights were enumerated, enshrined. The fundamental rights were enshrined under chapter 3. And in the very same chapter relating to fundamental rights, Article 32 was introduced, incorporated. The unique feature of Article 32 is the enforcing the fundamental right or filing or approaching the Supreme Court under Article 32 for enforcing the fundamental rights specified or enshrined in the Act itself is a fundamental right. Fundamental right inside the fundamental right. That is the unique feature. While the bare reading will show that this is what the article, subclause 1 of Article 32, the right to move the Supreme Court by appropriate proceedings for the enforcement of the right conferred by this part is guaranteed. So that is the unique nature. That is why Article 32 has been incorporated in the chapter relating to fundamental right itself. So then, Supreme Court has got a wider power for this. Under this article, it enforces the wider power is given to Supreme Court to enforce to see that every citizen of India enjoys the freedom which was obtained with great difficulty. Then another improvement in the provision Article 32 is with regard to adding of word, not only restricted to writ, it's a wider power has been given to the Supreme Court or under Article 32, or as the case may be for the High Courts under Article 226, by which any shall have power to issue, in addition to the 5 writs, namely habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, quo warranto, and the certiorari, whichever may be appropriate. In addition to that, under Article 32, the Supreme Court or under Article 226 High Court is empowered to issue any direction or orders, thereby empowering the High Courts to see that at any cost they can go to any extent in establishing the fundamental rights of the citizen. And in this regard, the Supreme Court in the case of Neelabati Behera versus State of Orissa, reported in 1993 to Supreme SCC 746, has held that the possibility of dispensation of justice in protecting the fundamental rights is widened by including the terms, directions and orders in Article 32, also under Article 226. And we will then, what says subclause 3? There is a power. So whenever the subclause 3 of Article 32 is relating to investing the power with some other court also, if by any reason, for example, the power has been given to protect the personal fundamental rights of the citizen by any means, if due to the huge pendency, if Supreme Court is not in a position to protect the fundamental rights of the citizen. So power has been given, the Parliament is permitted to enact the law, to invest with the power, granting a power to any other court. Incidentally, if you see, interestingly, it has not talked about to High Court, any other High Court. No, any other High Court. It can be introduced, any other court can be created exclusively for the protecting the fundamental rights. My humble view at this point, my humble view is under Article 32(3), this is the high time where the regional benches of Supreme Court is established in India before the Parliament enacts some other law divesting the power of Supreme Court in any other lower courts. This is my humble view and this is my humble opinion with regard to Article 32(3) of Constitution, where which permits the Parliament to enact a law to give a power to some other court to protect or issue writs. Then, Section 4, Class 4 of Article 32 is the right granted by the article shall not be suspended except as otherwise provided for by this Constitution. So, the right is guaranteed under Class 4. It is right, fundamental rights under Chapter 3, and with this also the Constitution Article 32, that is right to approach the Supreme Court, shall not be suspended except as otherwise provided by this Constitution. incidentally, I was talking about this only, this 432.4 only enabled, we can say that this subclass 4 of Article 32 enabled the Parliament in the 42nd Amendment to amend Article 368. Article 368 is relevant here. Class 3 of Article 368 reads like this. Nothing in Article 13 shall apply to amendment made under this article. That is Article 13 when we will come what it talks about. Then it is important. No amendment of this Constitution, including the provisions of Part 3. Part 3 is relating to fundamental rights, made or purporting to have been made under this article, whether before or after the commencement of Section 55 of Constitution, 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, shall be called in question in any court on any ground. So, by Article 38, power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and procedure thereof, if it is done as per the procedure under 368, only then the power of Supreme Court will not be there with regard to the right of approaching the Supreme Court. That is where the tribalization started, which I was talking about a few days back when I talked about the tribalization. But Article 359 of the Constitution of India talks about the suspension of fundamental rights at relevant as per the as required by the circumstances. The state may suspend the fundamental rights in the emergency circumstances. However, by 44th Amendment, Article 21 and Article 21 cannot be suspended even if Article 359 is invoked. So that is the power that is to protect the fundamental right. At no point, at least the basic fundamental right cannot be infringed at any point of time, even during the emergency. Then, now comes the Article 226. Once. The power of the High Court to issue certain writs. See, it starts with non-obstinate clause, notwithstanding anything contained. In Article 32, every High Court shall have powers throughout the territory in relation to which it exercises jurisdiction to issue to any person or authority. So similar to 32, Article 32, but it is independent power granted to the High Court. And mutually exclusive. This is in addition to the power given to the Supreme Court. The High Courts are also empowered or has got a power or jurisdiction to issue writs or pass any order. Then, unlike Supreme Court under Article 32, Supreme Court can be approached only for the establishment of or protection of fundamental rights. Whereas, under Article 226, the writ can be issued in addition to conferring or enforcement of rights conferred under Part 3, which is fundamental rights. The writ can be issued for any other purpose. Now we can look into, correlate, or we can see the relevance for including pass any order or any other order or direction. So the subtle difference between Article 32 and Article 226 is the High Court has got a wider power to try or to issue the writ or any wider subject has got, it encompasses wider subject, whereas the Supreme Court has got the wider jurisdiction, wider territorial jurisdiction to pass an order. Because High Court can restrict only within its jurisdiction, but wider power to try various subjects, various other subjects for any other purpose would encompass other subjects also, other than or in addition to the part 3, that is fundamental rights. And secondly, the cause of action. Article 226, there is a territorial jurisdiction, talks about the territorial jurisdiction where the any or part of the cause of action, full or part of the cause of action ought to have been taken place so as to exercise the power under Article 226. Cause of action plays a major role, and mere having the registered office or head office within the territorial jurisdiction of High Court cannot be the reason to file a writ petition, or the High Court will not have power to issue it just because it is having the jurisdiction, the head office is there. The cause of action is the important aspect for issuing a writ. And the person, residence of the person is not relevant. The person against whom, the authority against whom the writ is going to be issued, is has to be issued, is not relevant. The residence of the person is also not relevant, as long as the part of the cause of action has taken place within the jurisdiction of the High Court. Then, clause 3 of Article 226 protects the interest of the opposite party whenever the ex parte stay order is given. That is why we see nowadays why honorable judges are insisting upon the presence of the government councils or the standing councils or others for issuing or granting the interim stay, because clause 3 protects, in the case of ex parte stay, the opposite party has to be heard within 2 weeks from the date of the passing of order of interim order. That is how, because we do not know how the fundamental right, because of this interim order, how that other rights available to the opposite party is affected. What injury is caused, we do not know. Therefore, to protect their rights also, the clause 3 of Article 226 has been introduced. Then, it protects the rights. Once. Now, we will go to fundamental rights. This is what the power to issue for both High Court and Supreme Court under Article 32 and Article 226. Now, we'll go. What is the fundamental rights? When both the articles talk about the fundamental right under Chapter 3, reference to Chapter 3, I thought it is, we can look into what are all the fundamental rights available enshrined in the Constitution of India. But I will run through that, because each article, each fundamental right or article, starting from 12 to 30, Article 30, requires, each one will take hours to discuss. So I will just run through what are all the articles available. Article 12 to 30. Article 12 defines what is state. Any state or any establishment created by the state would fall under the definition state, and over a period of time, over 70 years of time, the scope of Article 12, terming the state, for the term state has been widened and various of the discussions were made by Honorable Supreme Court. Therefore, it is state, the writ petition, what is the relevance of Article 12 is writ petition can be filed against, or writ direction can be issued only against the state or machineries of state or part of state. Maybe it may be state government, central government against the central government, or respective state governments. That is what Article 12 says. Then Article 13, the law inconsistent with or in derogation of the fundamental rights. It protects if any law, because we have inherited various other laws, including the Civil Procedure Code, Criminal Procedure Code, pre-Constitution. There are many laws which also prevented certain fundamental rights, or there was no right. If any provisions of earlier laws pre-Constitution infringes the fundamental rights, that cannot be, that cannot go against, that cannot be used, and that would be considered as not applicable. If it is inconsistent with the fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution, that is no more a good law. Still, under writ petition, under Article 226 or 32, it can be rectified, or it can be otherwise, we can say it as remedied. Okay, that is what Article 13 talks about. Article 14, right to equality. Again, this article is quite interesting. The wording, if you look into, state shall not deny. They have not defined what is equality. State shall not deny any person equality before law or equal protection of the law. Meaning thereby, any law, it cannot be applied for universally. That can be determined among the equal. Everybody is not equal. It talks about among the equals, one cannot be deprived. He has got a fundamental right. For example, if somebody has got a qualification, equal qualification, or higher than the another person, if that fellow is deprived of that, when he satisfied all the conditions of the particular law, he cannot be treated differently. Now, this under Article 14 can be invoked to redress the fundamental, the injury to the fundamental right caused to the person. So, I can say with the equality has to be earned. It is not automatic. You have to qualify for yourself to be equal by birth, or by the act is not blanket applicable. By blanket, it is applicable to everyone. That is not equality. Equality, unless and until you fall under the provisions of particular act or particular right you earned, then you cannot claim equality under Article 14. Article 15, not to discriminate against the citizen on the ground only of religion, race,
sir,
caste.
sorry to interrupt, sir.
Huh? Yeah. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Ramesh.
Hello?
Sir, when you want to change the slide, you can just inform Jayalakshmi, sir.
Yeah,
just in case.
Yeah, no problem. I will take care. No,
Thank you.
not much. Now that thing is not available. No. No. Okay. I will tell.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Article 15, not to discriminate against the citizen on the ground only of religion, race, caste, sex, and place of birth or any other. This is relevant. This is totally, humanity is paramount under this article. Therefore, if any discrimination, only because of, there is a correlation between Article 14 and 15, only when there is a discrimination with regard to the religion, when somebody has got all the qualifications, but he is discriminated because of the religion or race or caste or sex or place of birth, then this under Article 15 protects the rights of the citizen. Then equality of opportunity in the matter of public employment is Article 16. But Article 16.4 contemplates or gives grants a permission for reservation to uplift the downtrodden people, rather uplift the backward classes people. That is what the exemption given under 16.4, Article 16.4 of the Constitution. Then comes Article 17, abolition of untouchability. After the advent of Corona, I don't think this now, as far as present thing is concerned, this Article 17 is any relevant at this juncture, because the government itself is canvassing or asking for not to touch anyone and keeping social distancing. I do not know whether anybody is going to file any writ petition against this claim or asking of the government not to touch anybody, to follow untouchability as far as the present situation is concerned. Then Article 18 talks about abolition of titles. I don't know what way this is under, but it has to be examined in detail. What way abolition of title would be protecting the fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution. But anyway, there may be some reason, but when we do a research on this Article 18, we will come to know why this article has been, but may not be relevant with regard to the protection or establishment of fundamental right for the ordinary citizens. Then Article 19, protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech. There's a freedom of speech, that is where, the freedom is given to the entire media, but power has been given, reasonable restrictions can be imposed by the government, state government or central government, with regard to the freedom of speech. That freedom of speech no way should affect the other freedom of the fellow citizen or fellow individual, not to hurt the sentiment. To protect the freedom or liberty of fellow citizen, the Article 19 gives power to the state or central government to enact law to impose reasonable restriction with regard to Article 19, right granted under Article 19. Then Article 20, protection respect of conviction for offense. You cannot convict the accused just like that. The procedure, it has to be in accordance with law, due process of law. It protects, even if many eyewitnesses are there, that somebody has committed a crime in front of many, still, unless and until he is tried under the due process of law, he cannot be convicted, he cannot be punished. That is what the protection is given under Article 20. That is why I started telling that Parukulle Nalla Nadu in the Bharata Nadu. This Article 20 is example for that. That no man can be condemned unheard. And under the due process of law alone, he can be tried or convicted. Then Article 20 is also talking about ex post facto. It's a wonderful thing where ex post facto, what is ex post facto is new law. If some act has been done by a particular person prior to the introduction of the new act, and in that new act, if the previous action is considered as criminal activity, he cannot be convicted under this new act for the act done in the past. That is what ex post facto. So the punishment contemplated in the new act cannot be applied retrospectively for the act of a person prior to the introduction of the act. This is a wonderful protection given under Article 20. Then there cannot be any double jeopardy. The man cannot be condemned or punished for a single offense twice more than once. And prohibition against self-incrimination. That is, prohibition against self-incrimination means the person cannot be compelled to give evidence against him. He has got every right to withhold, or he has got every right to protect himself. He cannot be forced to self-discriminate or forced to admit something which is not done by him, which he did not intend to say. So that is what is the protection given under Article 20. Then Article 21 protects personal liberty. But here again, the state government and central government are given a power or permitted to enact law to restrict what is the personal liberty. Personal liberty of one. I got nobody. Personal liberty, he can enjoy the personal liberty. As it is said, no, the personal liberty ends with other person. Your personal liberty ends with the other person. He has got, you cannot have the personal liberty and enforce on the other third person your liberty, because he has got his own liberty. Therefore, there's the article permits, Article 21 permits to enact law to regulate the personal liberty as well. Then Article 22 and Article 21 was in the year 2002. Article 21A was introduced, right to education as a fundamental right. It's a wonderful move that the right to education was considered as fundamental right, and it can be enforced by way of writ petition under Article 32 or Article 226. Then Article 22 talks about protection against arrest and detention under certain cases. Here again, the arrest can be only, or it also uses detention. So arrest can be only in accordance with law as per the Criminal Procedure Code or any other similar codes with regard to arrest. And detention, no, unlawful detention cannot be made. Under article, it protects the fundamental right. It protects the fundamental right of a person by issuing a writ petition against the unlawful detention. We will see what is the writ relating to this particular aspect of protecting against the arrest and detention. That's the habeas corpus. When we look into the kinds of or types of writ petition, we'll deal with that. Then Article 23 is relating to the protection of human value, prohibits the human trafficking in any manner, and prohibits the bonded laborers, protects the fundamental rights of the bonded laborers. Article 24 prohibits the employment of child laborers. It protects the freedom and fundamental rights of the child. And Article 25, freedom of religion, which is very visible. Article 26, freedom to manage religious institutions or affairs. That is where temples, mosques, and the churches are maintained. There's a freedom to maintain the religious institutions. Article 27, prohibiting levying of tax for religious purpose. That is where the secularism comes in, where there cannot be any separate law. Levying a tax for the purpose of, or for the advantage of any religion. That is what Article 27. Article 28, not to compel to follow a particular religion in the educational institutions. That is what Article 28. Incidentally, I studied in the Christian institution. My father worked for 35 years in Christian institution. I enjoyed that. Article 28. No, I was no way compelled to follow this thing. That is what I thank them, or I feel proud that Article 28 was fully invoked by the institution where I studied. Then Article 29, protection of interest of minority. Yes, there comes as every human being cannot be discriminated because of he belongs to a certain minority. It's a wonderful piece of legislation where it is protecting the interest of the minority. Article 29, Article 30, to establish educational institution by the minority. This is also a welcome provision, a wonderful article to maintain a balance in the society, unity in the society. The Article 30 empowers, or it can be considered as a fundamental right. The Article 31 was deleted. I'm not going into that. Now comes the power of the High Court to establish or to issue writs. What are all the power the High Court has got under Article 226? It's a territorial jurisdiction. The cause of action, wherever there is a cause of action arose within the jurisdiction of the High Court has got every power under Article 226 to issue the writ. The Constitution 15th Amendment Act of 1963, the writ said that the writ can be issued by the High Court if any cause of action arose within the jurisdiction of the High Court. As I said, mere head office cannot be the reason to file a writ, and cause of action is condition precedent to file a writ before the High Court. In this regard, AIR 1966, Supreme Court 81 is the relevant one. Then, what is under the power, whether High Court can interfere with the policy decision? Article 226 cannot be invoked for making any direction against the policy decision if there is no fundamental right can be claimed, or the High Court has no power to interfere with the policy decision of the state government or central government, provided, but at the same time, the High Court can look into the policy, whether that policy infringes any of the rights, or the certain policy, the portion of the policy or the policy, it violates the fundamental rights of any of the citizen, then they can interfere with the policy and writ can be issued. The High Court has got a jurisdiction to issue the writ. Then, the power of judicial review. Under Article 226, in the writ petition, the High Court has got a power to issue writs, and the power of judicial review is available. But though there is a judicial review under Article 226 is available, there is a self-imposed restrictions while dealing with those matters. What are all the self-imposed restrictions by the High Court? That is act of state. What is act of state? In the case of war, or movement of, in the case of war, certain actions have to be taken by the state or the central government to protect the interest or life of the citizens, and to moving the army when there is a war. These are all the act of states. The Article 220, the High Court cannot have the jurisdiction with regard to this. It's a self-imposed jurisdiction, self-imposed restriction by which the act of state cannot be interfered with. Political questions cannot be tried or cannot be heard. Substantial justice versus fundamental justice. Fundamental right. Only the fundamental right alone can be power to deal with the fundamental right alone can be done by the High Court. Judicial review can be done by the Supreme High Court under Article 226, and not the substantive right which otherwise the individual has got. It cannot be filed to protect those substantive right otherwise he has got. Then expert or technical matters. If any issue involves the expert opinion or expert dealing, expert alone can deal with that. Expert or technical matters cannot be tried, or writ petition cannot deal with those things. And educational or academic matters, meaning that you have to impart only this kind of education to this kind of set of people. It is a domain of government. It is the direct principles of under the chapter 4. It is the duty of the government. The power is granted under the direct principles of state policies for the government to enact law with regard to the education, in which there cannot be any fundamental right. You can claim that the government can only proceed only in this direction. It cannot be filed under for the educational or academic matters. Court-martial proceedings, court-martial proceedings, civil or private dispute, arbitration matters. These are all the matters where the judicial review cannot be exercised. Power of judicial review cannot be exercised by the High Court under Article 226. Contractual matters. When it comes to contractual matters, between when the contract is between some private and the government one. Now the law has evolved or developed to the extent where the High Court can, there are divergent views are there. The High Court or Supreme Court can interfere with that in certain cases. That is where we see, certain cases with regard to bid and all is been tried under Article 226. It has a lot, but basically these contractual matters, earlier it was not, power of judicial review was not exercised. Then criminal matters, Article 226 cannot be invoked. The debt recovery proceedings, family and matrimonial matters, rent control matters, the Article 226 cannot be invoked. Then comes the discretionary power of High Court. The High Court has got discretionary power to entertain or not, entertain the writ or not. But it can be exercised when there is violation of principles of justice and fair play. In this regard, with regard to the discretion, exercise of discretion, the Supreme Court 2004 8 SCC 195 has clarified that in certain exceptional cases, discretion can be exercised. Then there should be a proof for substantial injustice for invoking Article 226. The mere technical infraction cannot give any right to file writ petition on Article 226 or judicial power, to exercise judicial power in the case of technical infraction. Then, issue of rule nisi. The High Court has got a power under Article 226. It will call upon the opposite party to show cause as to why the rule applied for should not be granted. So opportunity is given to the opposite party why the writ should not be, rule nisi should not be issued. That is where the issue of rule nisi comes in. Then under Article 226, there is a power for High Court to grant interim relief. Then next we will go to types of writ petitions. I will take another 15 minutes to complete this session. The types of writ petitions, there are 5 types we know. 1, habeas corpus. Number 2, mandamus. Number 3, prohibition. Number 4, quo warranto. Number 5, certiorari. Then we will deal with one by one. What is the basic structure of this habeas, these writ petitions, types of writ petitions? Habeas corpus. Habeas corpus literally means producing the body or have the body. This is the first teaching which we heard in our college days as well. Habeas corpus means producing the body or have the body. The writ of habeas corpus is a writ directed to the person detaining another. It is a different than any other writs. This can be issued against the private person as well if we unlawfully detain any individual or any citizen or any person. This is the beauty of habeas corpus. And High Court has, under the habeas corpus, the writ is directed to a person detaining another, commanding him to produce the body of the prisoner at a time and designated place and cause of his capture and detention. You have to physically, you cannot say that he is here. The direction, somebody may say that, yes, he is available, very much available. They may send a photocopy or they may send some other evidence to show that he is available with him. No, he has to be produced before the court with a body, flesh. And he has to explain what is the reason for his detention. And habeas corpus cannot be issued to the person who is serving the sentence passed by the court. If he is punished and he is serving he cannot ask for habeas corpus, writ of habeas corpus. Then, criminal law, arrest and habeas corpus. Scope under habeas corpus is restricted when the arrest was under the criminal is restricted only for the unlawful detention, and it is not, if it cannot be invoked. Habeas corpus cannot be issued, or you cannot file Article 226 for habeas corpus when arrest was made under the criminal law for commission of offense under IPC and other criminal law. The habeas corpus can be issued only for the violation of fundamental right under violation of Article 22 of Constitution of India. The criminal procedure is complete on its own and cannot be diluted by way of habeas corpus. Then, in the recent origin, the habeas corpus, as I was telling, it is unique one where the habeas corpus writ petition can be filed for the custody of infant or a child. Custody of infant or a child, if there is a dispute, the matrimonial dispute is there between the father and mother of the child. But if then when it is said that it can be issued only against the state of Article 12, But under the habeas corpus, it can be extended and writ petition can be filed. Writ of habeas corpus can be issued for the custody of infant or the child. And we also see the recent origin in the modern society. The parents approach the High Court for issuance of habeas corpus in the cases where the children are unfortunately found, fortunately, unfortunately, we do not know, found to be with their lover or with any other person. But the high courts are very cautious in these kind of matters. After calling for them, they inquire with the person, the girl or boy, as to whether their willingness, whether they want to go with their husband or lover or any other person or with their parents, because after attaining 18 years or 19 years, their liberty has been protected even by the High Court. But habeas corpus is issued on obtaining or consent from the major person, again, for whom the order was directed to be produced. The habeas corpus can be issued in this kind of matters as well. The preventive detention and habeas corpus is a relevant factor where, in the interest of national security, if any preventive detention is made, the writ cannot be issued under the habeas corpus. This is reported, the case of reported in 2004, 3 SEC 75. It has been considered, it has been held that in the case of preventive detention, being a restriction on a personal liberty, may not be exercised in certain circumstances to protect the interest of or to ensure the law and order in the society. Next, writ of mandamus. The mandamus literally means a command. It is different from writ of prohibition or certiorari. In its demand for some activity in the part of the body or person to whom it is directed. It is a positive direction. The petition, then what is the cause of action? The petitioner must show that he has a specific legal right to the performance of legal duty by the government official against whom the mandam is sought for. The foundation of mandamus is the existence of right. Ubi just ibi remedium. The maxim ubi just ibi remedium is relevant here, wherein unless and until you have a right, you cannot ask for enforcing it. So unless and until you have a right, you cannot ask to issue the mandamus. The mandamus is a tool in the hands of the ordinary citizen when the public authority fails to perform his statutory duty for which he is employed. Then, what are all the instances where mandamus can be issued? The mandamus can also be issued to undo what has already been done in the contravention of statute or to enforce a duty to abstain from acting unlawfully. Most importantly, the mandamus will not be issued in case where it is unreasonable or injurious if granted, and it would affect others who are not party to the proceedings. There cannot be any blanket issuance of writ of mandamus order or direction under a mandamus, writ of mandamus. For a particular person, we have to look into what is the injury which may be caused to the other fellow human being, which will infringe the fundamental rights of the other human being, has to be looked into while issuing the mandamus. In case the issuance of mandamus will result in potential danger. There need not be an evidence. If it is it would result in potential danger to others, the mandamus need not be issued. Further, mandamus cannot be issued where the duty is impossible to be executed or performed. You cannot ask the officer or the machinery of the state to perform the duty, which is not possible to be done. So, in the case of impossibility, you cannot ask for the issuance of mandamus. Then, High Court cannot be issued against, mandamus cannot be issued against the High Court judges. But in case of administration, the mandamus can be issued with regard to the administration or administrative power of the High Court. This is what said in the case of report in 2003, 6 SCC 675. Mandamus cannot be issued to the legislature for enacting a particular law. You cannot seek a direction that laws to be enacted or laws to be enacted for this particular purpose. Then comes our tax matters, where there is the mandamus can be issued when there is an inordinate delay in making assessment or considering the refund claim under the tax statutes. The writ of mandamus can be issued to expedite the assessment of the assessees, returns to consider and pass order in the refund application. If the issuance of any license for import or export is kept pending by the licensing authority, the court may direct the department authorities to consider the application for license as early as possible. And time limit can also be fixed for the disposal of such applications. Nowadays, we also file when the goods are not assessed by the customs authorities or kept pending, which would incur huge demurrages. The writ of mandamus can be filed, seeking a direction to assess the goods and clear the goods for home consumption. This is what broadly with regard to the mandamus. Then writ of prohibition. The writ of prohibition is a judicial writ. It is entirely different from other writs. Each writ petition is unique on its own. The way they have incorporated the provision. It's a wonderful one which I like, where the writ of prohibition is a judicial writ issued by a superior court and directed to the lower court, preventing the lower court for usurping jurisdiction which is not legally vested. So, the writ of prohibition can be invoked wherever the court acts, lower courts acts without any jurisdiction. In other words, it is issued to compel courts entrusted with the judicial duty to keep them within the limits of the jurisdiction. They cannot step out of the jurisdiction. Nowadays, writ of prohibition is also issued for the quasi-judicial authorities not to step out. But in my experience, there is no many writ of prohibition is being filed. We either file writ of mandamus, habeas corpus of course is being filed. We file the writ of certiorari. And as regards the writ of prohibition, not much of writ petition is filed according to me. Even I have not filed any of such writ petition, writ of prohibition. But anyway, future it is better to know about the basic principles. A prohibited order is issued to restrain a public body from acting unlawfully. It is issued to public body also if wherever there is unlawfulness, that is not only to the courts, lower courts, it is also the public body. Then, the prohibition is different. The writ of prohibition is different from certiorari, because the writ of prohibition is for the present act, prohibiting from future, restraining the future act. writ of certiorari, when we look into for the past act. If all is already passed, the writ of certiorari comes into play. And writ of prohibition and mandamus. Writ of mandamus demands activity, compelling the officers or the person whom the direction has been issued to take particular action. But writ of prohibition restrains from taking an action. And writ of mandamus and writ of prohibition are two different poles apart. The prohibition and the certiorari, that's what I have talked about. Then there is an interim relief in the case of the writ of prohibition. As we were telling that there is a power to grant interim stay all the further proceedings or further operation of further proceedings by the lower court. Then, what are all the grounds for issuance of writ of prohibition? The writ of prohibitions can be issued to prevent a lower court or tribunal or the quasi-judicial authorities from proceeding further when such lower courts or tribunal proceeds to act without or in excess of jurisdiction, proceeds to act in violation of the rules of natural justice, proceeds to act under law which is ultra-virus or unconstitutional, proceeds to act in contravention of fundamental rights, and there is an error of law apparent on the face of the record. These are all the instances where the writ of prohibition can be issued. Then, prohibition against administrative authority, whether the writ of prohibition can be issued against the administrative authority. No, it cannot be issued against the administrative authority. There should be a judicial activity or quasi-judicial activity has to be involved with regard to the dispensation of justice. This writ of prohibition can be issued. And prohibition against administrative authority will not lie against, will not lie. It is held in the case AR 1954, Supreme Court 440. But in some cases, though they were not restrained, certain suggestions were given in the writ of prohibition to the authorities to follow certain norms if it is not in place. Only to that extent it can be done, but no writ against the administrative authority can be done under writ of prohibition. Then comes writ of certiorari, which we normally do after the advent of the tribunalization, after the introduction of or after the tribunals taken over in accordance with law, the certain powers. The writ of certiorari has lost, as far as the tax matter is concerned, it has lost its charm as far as the tax matter is concerned, because there is under the statute, the provision for appeal. It is the tribunals are created, appellate forum is there, and therefore the writ of certiorari has got a limited role to play. But generally speaking, the writ of certiorari become prominent and accessible after the advent of tribunalization. During the course of economic evolution in our country and the expansion of international trade necessitated the state and central government to enact various statutes, which are self-contained, providing for appeal remedy before the officers mentioned in such state. Therefore, the power of review is restricted whenever the act contemplates with regard to the appeal provision before the tribunal. And the writ of certiorari cannot be issued against the non-statutory body, and it can be issued only against the statutory body. Administrative law and the writ of certiorari. Under Article 226, the High Court has got the supervisory power of supervision on the quasi-judicial authorities in exercising their power is available under writ of certiorari. That is, as a matter of supervision, the Supreme Court, the High Court can issue or can pass an order in the writ of certiorari to correct the quasi-judicial authorities. Then alternative remedy and writ of certiorari. As I was telling, it is well settled proposition that when the particular statute provides for the remedy by way of appeal against the order or acts of executive or the officials of the government department, the courts normally will not exercise its jurisdiction under Article 226 to quash the order, and it will be relegated to avail the alternative remedy available under the Act. However, there is an exception to the above said rule. When quasi-judicial authorities passes an order without jurisdiction, beyond the scope of the provisions of the Act, without any authority of law, and in any order passed in violation of principles of natural justice, alternative remedy is not a bar for filing the writ petition or filing the writ of certiorari in Article 226. Then, writ of certiorarified mandamus. When my experience before the Honorable Justice Sirpurkar, when I read that writ of certiorarified mandamus, this cannot be accepted. I don't know, only this is applicable, this word, coining of word is available only before this Honorable Court, this court. There is no prevalence of certiorarified mandamus before Bombay High Court. There can be either certiorari or mandamus. You cannot, there is no word called certiorarified mandamus even in the Constitution. And it was stated, this will be taken care of by any other order or direction. Therefore, there is no need for this particular one. It was talking of the Honorable Justice was talking about this word certiorarified mandamus, but we now continue to do with that. Certiorarified mandamus, after quashing, certiorari is to quash the order, illegality is legal order, whatever may be the reason it is quashed, and not stopping quashing that order, making him to, in the case of, for example, if the refund is wrongly denied, we challenge that order of refund. I'm giving an example. Challenge the order of refund. Quashing that order alone is not sufficient. It's not enough. Therefore, the further direction is required, directing the authority to refund the amount lying with the department with the interest or whatever. Therefore, the certiorarified mandamus is relevant in those circumstances where mere quashing of the order may not serve the purpose. Then, who may apply? Who may apply for writ of certiorari? Unlike any other writ petition, writ of mandamus who has got a right, writ of habeas corpus who has been detained, writ of prohibition who is affected. As far as this certiorari is concerned, a person aggrieved by the order of the authority, government authority, alone can apply for writ of certiorari. No third party can come and apply for writ of certiorari. That is taken care of by some other procedure. In a third party coming on, which we may be dealing with that in due course. So, person aggrieved alone can apply for writ of certiorari. Then we have discussed about the taxation. In some of the matters of taxation, the High Court do interfere, despite there being the alternative remedy under the Act for filing an appeal. In case of extraordinary circumstances where the illegality not to perpetuate the illegality, in the tax matters, the writs are being issued. Similarly, the writ of declaration under Article 226 is very important writs wherever the provisions of the Act or ultra vires the provisions of the Constitution or the provisions of that Act itself, the writ of declaration is filed under Article 226. And the High Court has got power for judicial review to look into the ultra vires or the constitutionality of the particular provision. And indeed, various High Courts, and especially I want to refer to Madras High Court's decision in case of tax matters where the beauty dyers, the Madras High Court has held that particular provisions of compounding levy scheme relating to textile process as ultra vires provisions of the Central Excise Act itself. And under writ of certiorari, we also challenge the board circulars, the notifications, which are all recently the notification with regard to IGST was challenged and upheld, and it was held as ultra vires notification 8 and 10 of IGST. So provisions were to be ultra vires by the Honorable Gujarat High Court, and matter is also pending before this Honorable High Court in this matter. And therefore, under the writ of declaration, Article 226, the board circular, which is contrary to the provisions of the policy of the government or the contrary to the provisions of the Act, writ of declaration can be filed and it can be held as ultra vires. In very many cases, we have also got the order, the orders were passed holding that it is ultra vires, squashing that board circular notification or the provision itself, as the case may be. Then writ of quo warranto. Writ of quo warranto is distinct from writ of certiorari. In proceedings of certiorari, the question raised is the validity of the decision of judicial or quasi-judicial authority. Here, in the case of quo warranto, we question the power, authority of a particular person who passes an order. The proceedings of quo warranto, on the other hand, raises the question as to the validity of an appointment made by the executive authority to public office, which alleged to be contrary to the statutory provision. Wherever any person is appointed contrary to the statutory provision, the writ of quo warranto to remove him is being filed under Article 226. The authority of a person to hold a high public office can be questioned in the event of appointment is violation of any statutory provision. In this, who can file? A third party can file a quo warranto, and the court will not be concerned with the technical rules of delay or motive behind the challenge, in as much as it is expedient to prevent the continuance of usurpation. It is usurped when somebody is appointed without qualification or contrary to the statutory provisions. It means it has usurped the power. So, in order to put an end to the usurpation, you cannot see whether you have got a locus standi to file, whether you have got an authority to file, whether you have got a right to file. This need not be looked into in the case of quo warranto. Any third party can be, the third party can file it and question is authority to continue. The quo warranto can be issued on fulfilling the conditions like the office must be public, created by the statute or constitution. Then it cannot be issued against the private person. For example, in a private organizations, or you cannot question the authority of person holding the as a principal or chairman of any private educational institution. The Supreme Court has said in report in the AR 1973, AR 1973 Patna, page 85, has held that the quo warranto cannot be issued against the private parties. The writ of quo warranto can be issued in respect of following offices, that is, number of legislature, advocate general or government pleader or public prosecutor. It is held by Madras High Court, AR 1970, Madras 63. Speaker of Legislative Assembly, Mayor of Municipal Corporation, Vice Chancellor of the University or Senator, established by the state, and minister. The quo warranto can also be filed against the minister. And very interestingly, disqualifications subsequent to the appointment. The quo warranto lies only after the appointment. You cannot, the quo warranto cannot be filed, a writ of quo warranto cannot be filed, preventing somebody from getting appointed. That is altogether different circumstances. This disqualifies. Quo warranto can be filed only for the disqualification of the person already appointed. Then, quo warranto cannot be issued against the person who has already ceased to be holding that office, where he has retired or he has been removed or whatever reason. The quo warranto cannot be issued if the person is no more holding that office. And quo warranto cannot be issued for the past action done that he has done. We cannot question the past act done by the particular person while holding that post, official post. This is the subtle difference with regard to the quo warranto. Then I thought of running through the other aspects of the writ petition, namely there are alternative remedy under the Article 226, alternative remedy under Article 226, which I have dealt with in that. Then locus standi, the person aggrieved, I have said the person interested, person who has got a right alone can file the writ petition under Article 226. Then cause of action should have taken place, part or full should have taken place within the jurisdiction of the High Court. Only those persons can file the writ petitions. And whether the state itself can apply. It's an important question whether state itself can apply for a writ petition under Article 226. It is possible that legal rights of state which is legally entity under Article 300 of Constitution of India would be affected by another legal entity. So far as another state of Union of India is concerned, in such cases, is exclusively laid down under Article 131 by way of suit before the Supreme Court. However, where the state is affected by the order of an independent public body, example by the Election Commission, Article 131 is not applicable. I'm giving just an example of Election Commission. I will come to the what will happen to the Election Commission also. State may file petition under Article 226. In case of when Article 131 has no application in certain cases, the state may file the petition under Article 226. It is reported in 1984, supplementary Supreme Court cases 104. But the state cannot file any writ petition to challenge the validity of its own order. Now, as far as the filing of writ petition, locus standi, filing of writ petition by the department, Central Executive Department, we also come across the department filing the writ petitions against the order of the Settlement Commission where there is no alternative remedies available. We look into that, and it is also being entertained in some of the cases where order is being passed. But this phrase that petitioner, but the state cannot challenge its own order may not be applicable in these circumstances where there is no provision for the department or the state to redress their grievance. they can file Article 226. And my view is that, yes, the Article 226 can be invoked by the department against the order of the Settlement Commission, where there is no appeal provision is provided under the Act. Then comes the relevant one is the public interest litigation. The concept of class action, which is so far we have talked about the individual, all the writ petitions talk about the individual right, individual fundamental right of the each protection of fundamental rights of the citizen of the India, where we talked about the concept of public interest litigation is the class action is further liberated into the public interest litigation. The public interest litigation means a legal action initiated by some member of public for the enforcement of public interest in which the public or class of a community have some interest by which the legal interest or liabilities are affected. Therefore, when the society's right or legal rights are affected, the public interest litigation can be filed. And you cannot ask, you don't have any locus standi. As long as the public interest is involved is proved. The person who is filing need not be the powering part of that particular society. Still, as long as the public interest is infringed or it is affected, the public interest litigation to redress those injury can be filed under Article 226. In a PAL, it is not necessary that the petitioner should himself have a personal interest in the matter. The rule of locus standi is relaxed in the PAL. There are numerous individuals or organizations have claimed, standing on the basis that they are acting in public interest rather than on the interest of their own members. Then, for filing the writ petitions, other writ petitions, lawyer is not permitted. Advocates are not permitted to file any of those writ petitions for the individual or on behalf of the individual or the body. But the lawyers are allowed to file the PAL. When it comes to PAL, advocates or lawyers can file writ petitions. Public interest litigations can be filed by the lawyers for the welfare of the society. That is why I said Parukulle Nalla Nadu, Namma Bharata Nadu. Any quarter, the welfare of the citizen from any quarter is permitted. Rules are relaxed. Locus standi is relaxed whenever it comes to the public interest litigation. Which is said by Supreme Court in 1991, 3 Supreme Court, 153, Supreme Court cases 153. And in one of the cases, the High Court has issued a writ and entertained a public interest litigation filed by a media person. As he has collected the data, they have permitted the media person to question the fund allocation with regard to the particular project by the state. This is the power of the power conferred under the Constitution. But the public interest litigation is the evolution by the High Courts. We have to thank the High Courts for, in the interest of the public as a whole, in the interest of the public as a whole, the High Courts have exercised the jurisdiction diligently and redressed the sufferings of the citizen wherever there is an effect, wherever the public interest is affected. The procedure, each court, the High Courts have also framed certain procedure for filing a writ petition, and separate notification is being issued. Then comes the applicability of Civil Procedure Code to writ petition. Each High Court has got their own appellate rules framed for exercising extraordinary jurisdiction, and in some cases, they also some rare cases, certain orders and rules of civil procedure are adopted, though not specifically, but certain procedures are adopted, which I thought of telling what are all the orders or sections, but due to paucity of time, I'm not telling. And whether a joint writ petition can be filed as the joint suit. The writ petition has to be filed, only individual writ petition will be kind, as it is talking about the personal personal right or fundamental right. But some cases over a period of time it has been evolved. If there is a common interest is involved, common right is infringed, the collective or representative writ petition can also be filed. In one of the cases, the writ petitions, even I was a party in the case of T.E. Srinivasan versus HRNCE, where this Honorable High Court has held, the division bench of this Honorable High Court has held, the representative writ petition can be filed, which I can share with you the order number, which it is not reported. So representative writ petition can also be filed, and the joint writ petition can also be filed. One or more parties can be there. Then comes the estoppel and the res judicata and writ petition. Res judicata on the law is squarely applicable, on even the facts it's squarely applicable for the writ petition. Estoppel and writ petition, the government cannot say that it's a promissory estoppel. Estoppel is also applicable for writ petition when, based on the notification or based on the law, if somebody has taken an action and subsequently withdrawn, the promissory estoppel cannot, the government cannot claim immunity under the promissory estoppel, where there will be a separate session by our colleagues with regard to the promissory estoppel, which I am not going to deal with in extension. Now comes, we will look into what is the procedure for the filing the writ petition, which is very important. When normally, we give it to the clerk, and we always totally depend upon the clerk to get it passed and do that. But what are all the requirements of writ petition? Writ petition is affidavit sworn by the person for whom you are filing, signed, duly signed and notarized or attested by the advocate, supported by the petition separately, writ petition separately, the prayer is separately typed and given that. Number 2. Number 3, stay petition has to be separately filed. Two affidavits, 2 green affidavits have to be filed, one for the writ petition and another for the stay petition. And the separate stay petition giving the details or prayer, separately typing the prayer, has to be accompanied with that 2 affidavits, and bata has to be paid. The necessary 1,000 rupees per writ petition has to be, court fee has to be paid. Wakalat has to be filed, duly signed and attested, along with the required court fees has to be filed. Then the typeset, the original copy of the order has to be filed in case of writ of certiorari, and typeset or material documents in support of your arguments has to be filed as a typeset along with the writ petitions. And on filing, it will be numbered by the registry. If any defects are pointed out, it has to be cured. Defects have to be cured. On numbering, the next day, it will be coming for admission before the Honorable Court. The admission procedure of admission is separate. During that, either it will be admitted or notice for admission will be there. Interim order, export interim order can be passed subject to clause 3 of Article 226. After that, the notice will be issued. We have to file a fresh beta for notice whenever. Notice has to go to the respective respondents. Then the proceeding starts. Afterwards, the proceeding will continue. You all may be knowing it. These are all the basic requirements. Then, after passing over a writ appeal, writ appeal under clause 15 of the letter pattern can be filed within 30 days from the date of receipt of the original order from the registry. Then appeal to Supreme Court against the order of the judgment passed in the writ appeal. A special review petition under Article 132 of Constitution of India before the Honorable Supreme Court can be filed. This is the broadly which I think I have taken a little extra time. This is how I could complete, despite leaving many other things, but I hope I have completed. Thanking you very much for the patient hearing.